Leonard Wright Colby, who hailed from the U.S. state of Ohio, was a leader of the 1st Nebraska National Guard, American Indian Wars veteran, state senator of Nebraska and United States Assistant Attorney General. As a teenager, he fought in the American Civil War. During his career, he commanded both Nebraska and U.S. troops. He served as commander of the Nebraska National Guard, family, education, and early military activities. Colby was born in Cherry Valley Township, Ashtabula County, Ohio in 1846. The fifth of 7 children, his parents were Raoul and Abigail Colby. His parents were from Grafton County, New Hampshire. When he was about 4 years old, his parents removed to a farm 5 miles from Freeport, Illinois. As a teenager, he enlisted in the 8th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment and served the Union Army in the American Civil War. Wounded at the Battle of Fort Blakely in 1865, in almost the last battle of the Civil War, and was recommended for promotion and commission for gallant and meritorious services in the charge at Fort Blakely and the Siege of Mobile, Alabama, where he captured a Confederate flag. He was discharged that year. After his discharge from the Union Army in 1865, he with about 50 others from his regiment enlisted with the forces of Maximilian, serving with the rank of captain for several months, until his resignation in December 1865. On his return home, he entered the high school at Freeport, from which he graduated in July 1867 with the highest honors. In the fall of the same year, he entered the University of Wisconsin in the regular classical course, and he was graduated in June 1871 with the degree of Bachelor of Arts, again taking the highest honors of his class. He was graduated also from the military and engineering courses at the same institution, obtaining the degrees of civil engineer and mechanical engineer in the recommendation for a lieutenant's commission in the United States Army. During the last 2 years of his college course, he was commissioned and served as captain of the University Cadets at Madison, Wisconsin. Thereafter, he was graduated from the Law Department of the university with the degree of Bachelor of Laws. Career: Colby married Clara Dorothy Buick in 1872, and they removed to Beatrice, Nebraska, living near 7th and High Streets. He opened a law office in Beatrice, being associated in business with Linus B. Sale, a former college friend. In 1874, the University of Wisconsin conferred upon him the degree of Master of Arts. On June 25, 1875, he became associated with Alexander W. Conley in the organization of a company of state militia at Beatrice, and was commissioned first lieutenant of the company, which was designated as the Paddock Guards, in honor of United States Senator Algernon Paddock. In the summer of 1877, he was commissioned captain by the governor of Nebraska and placed in command of 4 companies of mounted rifles. He marched his battalion from Beatrice to Red Cloud, thence to northern Nebraska and Wyoming in pursuit of bands of marauding Native Americans. On his return, he was commissioned captain of the Paddock Guards, which command he held until June 13, 1881, when he was commissioned colonel of the 1st Regiment Nebraska National Guard. He had command of the Nebraska State Troops and 6 companies of United States regulars during the labor strike in Omaha in March 1882, at which time the city was placed under martial law. He was recommissioned colonel July 10, 1884, and before the end of his term, on April 11, 1887, was promoted, by appointment and commission, to brigadier general and placed in command of the 1st Brigade, comprising 2 infantry regiments, a troop of cavalry, and a battery of artillery. On April 11, 1890, his commission as brigadier general was renewed for another term of 3 years. During the winter of 1890 to 1891, Colby and his command were called into active service on the occasion of the uprising of the Sioux Indians of Pine Ridge and other agencies in South Dakota and Nebraska. The command took part with great credit in the engagement at Wounded Knee and many skirmishes along the borders of the Badlands, where the hostile forces were located, and won the congratulations of Major General Nelson A. Miles, who complimented Colby on his successful management of the Nebraska troops. On his return home, Colby was presented with a gold medal for gallant and efficient services rendered the state of Nebraska. The fourth day after the Battle of Wounded Knee, when the detail went out to bury the dead, a Lakota baby girl, about 4 months old, was found on the battlefield, tied in the usual fashion on her dead mother's back, and found under a covering of snow. Her head, hands, and feet were frozen in the severe storm that followed the battle, but she fully recovered. The child was taken by Colby to his home, was given the name of Margaret Elizabeth, and the Indian name of Zintkala Nuni. She was reared and educated at his home. April 10, 1893, Colby was for the third time commissioned Brigadier General of the Nebraska State Troops, and in July of the following year his command was again called into active service in the suppression of the strike at the packing houses in South Omaha, Nebraska, where order was restored without damage or casualty. In December 1896, during the progress of the Cuban Revolution against Spain, Colby commenced the organization of the American Cuban Volunteer Legion, and in the following year, he completed the enrollment of 25,000 American volunteers, with headquarters at Matamoros, Mexico, and raised $1,200,000 for the establishment of the Cuban Republic. Upon the destruction of the battleship Maine in Havana Harbor, he tended the services of the Cuban Legion in the approaching Spanish-American War. Colby was commissioned June 3, 1898, by President McKinley, as Brigadier General of United States Volunteers. He was first assigned to the command of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Division, 3rd Army Corps, stationed at Chickamauga Park, Georgia. For some weeks he had command of the 1st Division of the 3rd Army Corps, and was the ranking general in command at the time of the review at that camp. He was afterward given command of the 2nd Brigade, 2nd Division of the 4th Army Corps, and was thereafter for some time in command of the camp and the division at Anniston, Alabama. In January 1899, he was sent to Havana, Cuba, and upon his return to Washington, D.C. at the end of February of that year, he was mustered out of the service, with the rank of Brigadier General of Volunteers. Upon his return to Nebraska, Colby was appointed State Adjutant General, which office he held from May 6, 1901, to February 20, 1903. On August 8, 1906, he was placed on the retired list, with the rank of Brigadier General. In November 1876, General Colby was elected state senator to represent Gage and Jefferson counties, and in 1886 he was re-elected to the state senate to represent Gage County. During the latter term he introduced 50 bills of importance, of which about 30 passed the Senate, and of the latter number more than half became laws. In June 1891, Colby was appointed by President Benjamin Harrison as Assistant Attorney General of the United States, his duties embracing, among other important litigation, the defense of claims for damages against the government and Indian tribes. These involved over 10,000 cases in the Court of Claims and the United States Supreme Court, and over $40 million. Upon his retirement from the United States Department of Justice, he was employed by the Creeks, Cherokees, and Seminoles, 3 of the tribes in the Indian Territory, as their attorney in Washington, D.C., and during this employment he obtained a judgment against the government and in favor of the Cherokee Nation for $6,742,000. Since the declaration of World War I, Colby ended his services to the United States and to the state of Nebraska, and requested to be recalled from the retired list into active service. He has been placed on the list of officers subject to call by the Department of War and having the personal assurance of Secretary of War Newton D. Baker that his services will be required in the near future. He has passed his physical examination for such service. In the meantime, he served as government agent and attorney for the Draft Board, as chairman of the Gage County Council of Defense, as a member of the War Works Committee, and took an active part in the campaigns for the several Liberty Loans, the Red Cross and YMCA drives in the county and district. He also returned to practicing law in several states. From 1921 through 1924, he served as a Nebraska district judge. Personal life: Colby married Clara Dorothy Buick in 1872 and they removed to Beatrice, Nebraska, where she founded, published, and edited the Woman's Tribune, a suffragist newspaper. They adopted a boy, Clarence, in 1885 from an orphan train. In 1891, Colby returned home from the Wounded Knee with a Sioux baby, Zintcala Nooney, whom he named Marguerite Elizabeth and whom he adopted while his wife was away lecturing. A third child, Ada Mary, documented in Buick family papers, was also adopted. She died when she was less than a year old. Colby and Clara divorced March 30, 1906. There were reports by historians that Colby abused Marguerite. On June 4, 1906, he married Marie H. Moller, his longtime mistress, after she had inherited $250,000. They had one son, Paul Livingston Colby. Colby had been a member of the Society of Foreign Wars, Loyal Legion, Grand Army of the Republic, Spanish Amic Pan War veterans, the Blue Lodge and Royal Archmasons, the Red Men, Knights of Pythias, Nebraska State Historical Society, Nebraska Pioneers, the Nebraska and American Bar Associations, the Republican Club, and the Christian Church at Beatrice. He died in 1924, at Leavenworth, Kansas.